Welcome to Alien Shadow. If you love epic sci-fi stories where humanity shines, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for thrilling HFY adventures. Join us and be part of the journey. The empty streets asterisk the rain had stopped, but the cold stayed in the air, making the steel streets of the alien marketplace shine like broken glass. Valari walked barefoot through the mud and trash, her thin clothes soaked, clinging to her skin. Like a second layer of shame, every step made her flinch, not from pain, but from the eyes that watched her without kindness. Some laughed, some stared, some ignored her completely. She kept her head down, arms crossed, holding her torn shawl tightly around herself. Her stomach growled again, loud this time, and a passing vendor looked up, annoyed. No credits, no food, the vendor said, without even looking her in the eye. Valari opened her mouth to speak, but closed it again. Knowing no words could change anything, she had nothing, not even a name worth remembering. The market was busy, even this late. In the day, machines hissed, aliens argued. Lights blinked over plastic fruit and fake meat. She walked past it all like a ghost, hoping anyone might offer a crumb. But the universe had long stopped listening to her hopes. Valari reached a stall that sold half-rotten bread and broken protein cubes. The smell made her dizzy, but her hands stayed still. The stall keeper, a thick-skinned alien with red eyes, saw her staring. "You touch, you pay." He growled. "I have nothing," she whispered. "Then go away," he spat. Tossing a cube of food at her feet like trash, she picked it up carefully. Holding it close like treasure, she didn't eat it yet, not in front of so many eyes. As she turned to leave, a hand grabbed her wrist, a tall insectoid alien, with sharp mandibles and greedy eyes, pulled her close. "You want more," he hissed. "I'll trade food for skin." Valari froze, heart pounding, breath short. "I can't," she stuttered. The alien laughed, showing teeth, then starve. He pushed her away, and she stumbled, the cube falling into the mud. Valari dropped to her knees, reaching for it, but a boot crushed it first. She looked up and saw another man. Not an alien this time, but human. The human stared at her, then at the ruined food, and finally at the alien who crushed it. "Step away," he said, his voice calm but cold. The insectoid blinked. "Confused? She's not yours." "She's not yours either," the human replied. The alien hissed and backed away, muttering curses. The human bent down, took off his coat, and wrapped it around Valari. "Come on," he said, offering his hand. "Let's get you something to eat." Valari didn't move at first. She didn't understand this kindness, didn't trust it, but her legs were shaking, and the warmth of the coat felt like safety. Slowly, she took his hand, and he helped her stand. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask where she came from. He just walked with her down a quiet alley, away from the crowd, inside a small shop. The smell of real food filled the air. He sat her down, placed a tray of soup and bread in front of her. She stared at it, eyes wide, hands trembling. "It's for you," he said gently. "Eat." Valari picked up the spoon like it might break in her hand. The first taste made her cry. Silent tears running down her cheeks. He didn't comment, just sipped his drink and waited. Halfway through the meal, she finally spoke. "Why are you helping me?" The human shrugged. "You looked like you needed help, that's all." She asked, voice small. "That's enough," he said. Valari nodded slowly. Still unsure if this was real or a trap, she whispered again, the same words from before. "All I have are my clothes." The human looked at her, not with hunger or pity, but with respect. "Then keep them," he said firmly. "No one's taking anything from you tonight." Valari looked down at the food, then at the man. He had scars on his hands, rough skin from work, not soft like the nobles. He looked tired but kind, strong but not cruel. "What's your name?" She asked. "Cade," he answered. "And you?" She hesitated. "Valeri." "Well, Valeri," he said, standing up, "let's get you someplace warm." She stood too, legs still weak, but her heart steadier now as they walked into the night. The empty streets didn't feel so cold anymore. The human's offer Cade didn't take Valeri to a home or a hotel. Instead, he guided her through narrow side paths until they reached an old transport hub. The roof was cracked, lights flickered weakly, and the floor had dust, but it was dry and quiet. A single heater hummed near the corner beside an old cargo crate covered in blankets. "This is where I sleep," he said, removing his boots and sitting on the crate. Valeri stood in silence, expecting him to change or show a different face now that they were alone. But Cade only reached into a storage box and pulled out a folded towel and a thermal blanket. "You can use this," he said, handing them to her without looking at her body. "No tricks?" she asked softly. Still unsure. "Only warmth," he replied, turning his back to give her privacy. She dried herself with the towel and wrapped the blanket around her frame. Still cold but now comforted, she sat opposite him on the crate, hugging her knees close and watching him light a small portable stove. The scent of broth returned, even stronger than before. Valeri's stomach ached again. Louder this time, Cade poured a second bowl and placed it in front of her without a word. She stared at him as she ate, slowly and carefully, not wasting a drop. He didn't touch her, didn't ask questions, just let her finish in peace. It was the first time in years she had eaten without fear or pressure. "Why here?" she asked after the silence stretched too long. "Because no one comes here," Cade said, adjusting his coat into a pillow. "It's not safe," she said. "You should have left me. You looked like someone who deserved better," he replied, leaning back. She watched his face closely, looking for a lie, a game, anything cruel beneath his words. But there was only calm truth in his voice, and something that scared her more than danger kindness. She sat quietly, her hand moving to the edge of her torn shawl. She pulled it tighter, even though the blanket covered her now. "Men like you don't help girls like me," she whispered, not accusing, but confused. "Maybe they don't," he said, "but I do." She looked away, hiding her eyes behind her hair, unsure of what to say. In her world, warmth came with a price, and safety was always a trick. "You don't belong here," she said. "You talk like someone from the high sectors." Cade chuckled softly. "I used to be. What happened?" she asked, curiosity slipping through her fear. "I saw too much," he replied. "Started caring when I should have walked away." He didn't say more, and she didn't ask. Both sitting under the faint hum of the old heater. Their silence wasn't empty, was shared space. Something rare and fragile. After a while, Valeri stood and walked to the corner of the room. She looked out through a broken panel, watching the lights of the upper towers above. "So many ships pass over, but no one ever looks down," she said. "They never see us," he added, walking beside her. She turned to him, trembling not from cold, but from something deeper. "I'm not used to this," she whispered. "I don't know how to be normal." "You don't have to be anything," Cade said. "Just be. No one ever told me that before," she said, voice almost lost in the wind. "You're hearing it now," he replied, placing a mug of warm water in her hands. Valeri sipped it slowly, her fingers brushing his for a second. She pulled back, unsure, but he made no move, didn't lean in or stare. Instead, he stepped away and sat back down on the crate, letting her decide her place. She returned to the other side and sat again, watching the small stove flicker. "This feels strange," she admitted. "Like it's not real." "It's real enough," he said. "You're warm, you're fed, and no one will hurt you tonight." Her eyes filled again, but this time she wiped them herself. No shame in the tears. I don't have anything to give you. She whispered, her voice cracking. You don't owe me anything, Cade replied. Food isn't a contract. She didn't respond for a long time. Only pulled the blanket closer and let her body relax, for the first time in many cycles. She didn't sleep with one eye open. She didn't have to pretend she was strong. Or fight off wandering hands. Valari slept quietly while Cade stood guard beside the stove, silent and still as the heater hummed and the wind outside faded. Something new entered her world. Not just safety, not just rest, but the beginning of trust. The past beneath her skin, Valari woke to warmth she didn't expect. Her eyes opened slowly, afraid it was just another dream. But there was the old crate, the soft blanket. And Cade, sitting by the heater sipping something hot. He looked over. Not surprised, she was awake, and gave her a quiet nod. There were no guards, no chains, no harsh orders barking at her. Just a man watching a flame and a girl who didn't know how to be free. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from years of sleeping. On steel and dirt, her eyes scanned the room, not for danger, but for the habit of survival. Cade noticed but didn't comment, letting her do what she needed after a moment. He passed her a small piece of bread and a thermos. The gesture was simple, like it was normal to share breakfast. But to her, it felt like a ritual she'd never been allowed to join. They didn't talk at first, letting the heater hum fill the quiet when she finally spoke. It wasn't planned, just spilled out. I was 9 when they took me, she said, her voice flat. Cade didn't move or interrupt, just listened. They said my parents owed them money, she continued, staring at the wall. So they took me instead. She pulled her sleeves back, revealing faded marks, burned symbols, and numbers inked into her skin. Cade's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. They sold me to a mining crew, she said. Said I was cheap labor. I worked in tunnels, too small for adults, too toxic for robots. Her fingers traced one of the brands without emotion. I stopped speaking for a year after my first owner died. Valari glanced at Cade, waiting to see disgust, pity, or even fear. But his face remained calm, respectful, and focused. You're not property, he said, not to anyone. She nodded slowly, not because she believed it, but because she wanted to. Cade reached into his pack and took out a small toolkit. He opened it and placed a scanner and a laser blade on the table. What's that? She asked, sitting up straighter. Your freedom, he said, if you want it. She looked confused until he pointed at the tracker burned into the back of her neck. The round scar that pulsed faintly, always reminding her she was tagged. She touched it, afraid of what might happen if it were removed. What if they find me? She whispered, They already are, Cade said. But they won't stop unless you become invisible to them. He moved carefully, asking her to sit still while he scanned the implant. The device beeped softly, confirming the signal with steady hands. He activated the microblade and began cutting slowly. Valari gritted her teeth but didn't scream. Pain was an old friend, and this time it came with a promise of something better. When it was done, the implant lay on the crate's maul, black and finally silent. Cade crushed it beneath his boot without a word. Valari touched the fresh wound on her neck and felt something she didn't expect, lightness. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't from pain. She looked at him and saw more than a man. She saw a line drawn between her past and her future. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything, he replied, placing a clean bandage over her skin. For a few minutes, they sat in silence again. But it felt different now. Not heavy or cold, but waiting. Like the air before sunrise. Then the silence broke with footsteps outside. Harsh and fast, Cade stood immediately, hand reaching for a metal rod beside the heater. Valari froze, her eyes wide as shadows moved past the broken windows. 3 figures stood at the entrance. Local thugs from the lower rings, they wore leather jackets, cyber mods, and the cruel smiles of men who hunted the weak. "She's not yours," the tallest one said, pointing at Valari. "She doesn't belong to anyone," Cade replied, stepping between them. "We were promised a reward." Another hissed, showing a bounty tag. For returning stolen property, Valari backed against the wall, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She wasn't wearing chains, but she felt them again. Heavy and cold, Cade didn't move away from her, his eyes locked on the leader. "She's with me," he said. "You'll have to go through me." The thugs laughed. But there was hesitation in their steps. Cade didn't have a blaster, but his stance said he didn't need one. The leader pulled out a shock baton and pointed it forward. "Then bleed for her," he growled, stepping into the room. Valari screamed as the first blow landed, Cade's arm raised to block it. He grunted in pain but didn't fall, swinging the metal rod and catching one thug in the ribs. The others charged, and chaos filled the room with noise and fear. But Valari didn't run, not this time. Not again. She grabbed a loose pipe from the ground and struck the third thug from behind. He fell, stunned, giving Cade enough time to knock down the second. Blood hit the wall and the heater sparked. But they were still standing when the last thug limped away, holding his side. Valari dropped the pipe. Her hands shook. Her breath came in gasps, but her eyes were clear. "You fought for me," she whispered. "So I fought too." Blood and bread. Cade was bleeding from his side, and the heater flickered weakly behind him. His breathing was rough, one arm hanging limp as he leaned against the wall. Valari moved fast, pulling him away from the broken crate and laying him down on the floor. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear for the first time in years. She had seen blood before, but this time it was for her, not because of her. She pressed cloth against the wound, whispering to herself so he wouldn't hear her panic. "You're not dying," she said, "not after everything." Cade's eyes fluttered open, pain clouding his face. "You okay?" he asked through gritted teeth. "I'm not the one bleeding," she snapped, pressing harder. He gave a weak laugh, then coughed, his body curling slightly. Valari looked around the old shelter, searching for anything that could help. She found a small medkit under the bench, dusty but unopened. Inside were gauze rolls, pain patches, and a sealed injection labeled sealant gel. She read the instructions carefully. Afraid to make it worse, Cade tried to sit up, but she pushed him back gently. "You saved me," she said. "Now let me save you." He stopped fighting her and let her work. His eyes locked on hers with silent trust. She cleaned the wound, ignoring the blood that soaked into her sleeves. Every drop reminded her of what he had done. Not with words, not with promises, but with action. He didn't try to own her or use her. He stood in front of danger when everyone else stepped aside. She wrapped the gauze tight and applied the patch, whispering, "Stay alive." Cade drifted into sleep, his body weak but safe for now. Valari sat beside him, legs crossed, watching over him like a guardian. The storm outside had passed, but the real danger still waited in the shadows. News would spread fast, and soon. Others would come, bigger ones, stronger ones. But something had changed inside her, something sharp and solid. She was done running, done being prey, done being nothing. She stepped outside, wrapping the blanket tight. The sky was dark, filled with low-flying cargo ships and blinking lights. She found a food stall near the corner and stared at the roasted bread turning slowly. The vendor glanced at her, then frowned, back again. Valari didn't speak, just dropped a silver ring on the counter, one she had taken from the thug's belt. "3 pieces," she said firmly. The vendor hesitated, then snatched the ring and gave her a paper bag. Valari held it close, warm and soft, and walked quickly back to the shelter. She broke the bread into small chunks, dipping one into a cup of water and feeding it to Cade. He stirred, opening his eyes again, voice hoarse, "Smells like old bread." "It is," she said. "But it's ours." Cade smiled weakly and took another bite, his hand brushing hers in quiet thanks. They shared the meal in silence. Two survivors wrapped in a stolen piece. Valari didn't say much, but her eyes stayed on him like a promise. The moment felt too fragile to name, but too real to ignore. "Why did you fight for me?" she asked suddenly, her voice low. Cade took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling with effort. "Because you're worth it," he said simply. Valari stared at him, not sure how to answer. No one had ever used those words for her, not even once. To be worth it was something she'd never believed. But now, with blood on her sleeves and bread between them, she wondered if he was right. She looked down at the floor, then at her hands, then at his tired eyes. "I'm staying," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, she placed a metal rod near her bedroll, just in case she fell asleep sitting upright, one hand still resting on Cade's arm. The stars above the cracked roof looked different now. Not cold or unreachable. She dreamed of things she never allowed herself to want: warm food, safe places, real names. In her dream, someone whispered her name, not like an order, but like a song. And when she awoke, the world was still cruel. But now she wasn't alone. "They want her back, asterisk." Valari stepped outside before sunrise, her body alert, her mind sharper than ever. The streets looked quieter than usual, but that only made her more cautious. She had lived too long in shadows to trust peace that came without. Warning: the air smelled strange, like oil and metal, mixed with something worse. Trouble. A sleek black drone floated above the rooftops, scanning every alley without care. Her breath caught when she saw the logo on its side. The mark of a merchant house, she thought, had forgotten her. She walked back into the shelter fast, her face tight. Cade was awake, sitting on the crate with fresh bandages and a heating pack against his side. She didn't waste time with greetings. Only two words escaped her lips: "They're here." Cade's eyes narrowed as he stood slowly, pain flashing across his face, but ignored. "Who?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The ones who branded me," she said. "The ones who want me back." They packed quickly, gathering tools, food, and scraps into an old satchel. Cade's ship was still docked far on the edge of the port. A long walk through dangerous paths. Valari moved like a shadow again. But this time she wasn't hiding alone. Cade walked beside her, limping but steady. She checked every corner before they turned, every mirror for reflections. She was no longer just surviving. She was protecting something worth keeping. Halfway through the sector, they saw them. 3 armored men walking slow, scanning faces, holding stun rifles to clean for street use. They weren't bounty hunters, they were professionals, paid by rich hands. Valari ducked behind a bin, pulling Cade with her. "They've tagged the port," she whispered. "They're waiting there. Then we'll go around," Cade said without hesitation. They moved deeper into the broken levels, where the lights didn't work and the pipes hissed. Valari remembered these tunnels well. She had escaped through them once before. Back then, she was crawling, bleeding, barely breathing. Now she was walking beside someone who refused to let her crawl again. They passed old vendors, beggars, and eyes filled with fear, but no one stopped them. No one dared to speak. At a hidden checkpoint, Cade pulled out a forged ID and waved it at the terminal. It blinked red, then green, then froze entirely. "We've been flagged," he said under his breath. Valari's heart pounded as a voice came from the speaker above. "Unauthorized passenger detected. Submit for retrieval." She grabbed Cade's wrist and pulled him back into the shadows, eyes wild. "We can't run forever," she said, pressing against the wall. "I'm not asking you to run," he answered. "I'm asking you to live." She stared at him, confused, until he pulled something from his pocket. A chip, a new ID, made in her name, without marks, without chains. He pressed it into her palm and said, "This makes you real in the system." Her hand trembled as she held it, feeling like it burned and healed her at the same time. "But what about you?" she asked, voice cracking. "They'll trace it back to you." Cade smiled faintly. "Then we'll leave together." "But we can't get through the port," she said. "Not the front gates," he answered. "But there's a cargo lane they won't watch." He handed her a small remote. Linked to his ship's manual controls, they circled around the outer docks. Avoiding patrols and scanning towers, the city above glittered like it always did. Rich and full of things she could never touch. But Valari didn't look up anymore. Her eyes were on the path ahead. Cade guided her into a narrow tunnel, leading to the base of Dock 43. Old crates, frozen pipes, and flickering lights welcomed them like ghosts. There, hidden beneath dust, sat his ship, small, patched, and beautiful. As they reached the loading ramp, a voice echoed behind them. "There she is." Valari turned, her old captor standing 10 feet away in a polished suit and a false smile. "She ran off with my property," the man said, pointing past her. Cade stepped in front of her again, voice calm and dangerous. "She's not yours," he said. "She never was." The man raised his hand, signaling the soldiers behind him. Valari knew she couldn't fight them all, but she wouldn't be taken again. She moved without thinking, slamming her thumb onto the remote. The ship roared to life, its engine howling through the alley. The force knocked the soldiers off their feet as Cade pulled her into the ramp. They jumped aboard just as the ramp slammed shut behind them. Inside, Cade collapsed in the co-pilot's seat, breathing hard. Valari took the pilot's chair, hands shaking. But steady, she looked at him, at the stars blinking ahead through the glass. "They want me back," she whispered, "but I'm already gone." Cade nodded, bleeding but smiling. "Then fly, Valari," he said, "and don't look back." The ship shook violently as it lifted off from Dock 43. Valari gripped the controls with both hands, her jaw clenched tight. She had never flown a real ship before, not alone, not in the pilot's chair. But Cade was too weak to fly, and there was no one else left to trust outside the windows. The city turned into a blur of lights and smoke. She pulled the thrusters hard, climbing into the clouds with her heart racing like fire. Behind them, 2 patrol ships gave chase, their blue lights flashing across the sky. "Unregistered vessel," came a voice through the comms, cold and demanding. "Powered down and prepared to be boarded." Valari didn't answer, didn't hesitate. She leaned forward and whispered, "Not this time." Then she slammed the acceleration lever forward and broke into open sky. Alarms filled the cockpit. Warning of lock-on signals and incoming fire. Cade coughed in the seat beside her, blood staining the side of his shirt. "You're doing good," he said weakly, forcing a smile through the pain. Valari's eyes stayed fixed on the radar, watching. "The ships closed the gap. We're not fast enough," she said, panic creeping into her voice. Cade reached out and tapped a blinking panel. Then outfly them. She didn't know what she was doing, not completely. But she remembered how Cade had watched the skies like maps. She turned the ship sharply left, spinning through a gas cloud that blinded the enemy sensors. The patrol ships fired too late, missing their target by meters. Valari dove down, hugging the atmosphere line, risking a burn. The ship groaned under pressure, but it held. "Where's the jump gate?" she asked, wiping sweat from her forehead. Cade checked the navigation map with one half-open eye. "Sector 8, near the mining belt," he said. "It's old, but unguarded." Valari turned the ship toward it, setting coordinates by instinct. And luck, the engine lights flickered again. Warning of overheating. "We only get one shot," she muttered to herself. As they reached open space, more ships appeared on the scanner. Too many, too close. Their weapons locked and charging. Valari's Hands moved fast, flipping switches and cutting auxiliary power. The lights dimmed, the engine cooled, and the ship went dead just for a moment. To the enemy, they looked like floating debris. Just another ghost in space. The ships passed by, blind to the silent bird hiding in plain sight. Cade stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Where did you learn that?" he asked, amazed. Valari didn't look at him, her voice soft. "I watched. I remembered. I survived." She powered up the ship slowly, guiding it around the asteroid belt like a shadow. In front of them, a broken relay spun in space, marking the edge of the old jump gate. It was cracked, rusted, forgotten, but it still worked. "Will it hold?" she asked. "Unsure. It has to," Cade replied. Pressing the jump code into the console, the gate sparked with unstable light. Forming a shaky tunnel of stars, Valari lined up the ship and braced herself. "Hold on," she said, gripping the wheel as the engines roared again. Then she pushed forward, and the stars swallowed them whole. Inside the jump tunnel, everything went silent. No alarms, no chase, no warships, only flickers of time stretching in all directions. Cade closed his eyes, resting finally without fear. Valari sat still, watching the lights blur past the glass. Her body hurt, her mind burned. But something inside her felt clear. She wasn't running anymore. She was choosing where to go. The ship dropped out of hyperspace into an empty region, far from known systems. A lonely moon circled a dim blue star, casting soft light into the cockpit. The ship drifted quietly, no one chasing now. No bounty signals echoing through space. Valari powered down the engines and floated in the silence. Cade stirred beside her, groaning from the pain, but smiling when he saw her. "We made it," he whispered. Valari leaned back in the seat, her eyes glassy but calm. She had flown through death, past the edge of capture and into the unknown for the first time. The silence didn't feel empty, felt earned. She looked at Cade and then at her hands, scarred but strong. "All I had were my clothes," she said quietly. "But now, I have this ship, my will, and a future." Cade reached for her hand and held it gently. "Without ownership or demand, you're free now," he said, "and no one's taking that from you." Valari nodded, looking out into the stars, her fingers brushing the ship's controls again. She didn't know where they would go next or what waited in the dark. But she would face it standing tall, not crawling, not begging. She was more than a girl hiding in the streets. She was a survivor with her own name, and no galaxy would ever make her feel small again. Free at last, the small ship floated above a quiet moon. Its engines cold, but its lights glowing softly. Valari stood at the front window, arms crossed, eyes locked on the stars beyond. Each one looked like a door she could open now, a future she could name herself. Behind her, Cade rested on the co-pilot bench, his wounds wrapped, his breathing steady. They had escaped the city, the bounty, and the chains. But freedom wasn't just escape, was learning how to live again. Valari stepped into the tiny washroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was thinner, harder, but her eyes had changed the most. They weren't full of fear anymore. They were searching, alert, alive. She took off the torn shawl she had once clung to like armor. It smelled of blood and fear and years she no longer wanted to carry. She folded it gently and placed it in a storage crate, leaving it behind like a grave in the cargo bay. She opened the old storage locker filled with things Cade had collected. There were tools, spare parts, worn jackets, and a folded black jumpsuit. She ran her fingers over the cloth, clean and simple. No branding, no chains, when she wore it. It felt strange, not like a disguise, but like the start of something real. She looked at her reflection again and whispered, "This is me now, and for the first time." She believed it. Cade woke with a groan as she entered the cockpit. His smile was tired but proud as he saw her standing tall. "Didn't think I'd live to see you in pilot gear?" he joked. Valari smirked, sitting beside him and tapping the console like she'd done it for years. "You're looking at the newest captain of the Sable Star," she said, and Cade raised his hands in mock surrender. "I won't argue with that." They spent the next hours repairing the damage, checking wires, tightening panels. Valari moved through the ship like it belonged to Herbie, 'cause now it did. Cade gave her advice when she asked, but mostly, he just watched. He saw something rise in her that had been buried for too long. Purpose. Not survival, not fear, not shame, just quiet confidence. She wasn't a slave girl anymore, and she never would be again. Later, they docked at a small trading station. On the edge of forgotten space, it wasn't rich, but it was safe neutral. Unbothered, silent, Valari walked through the market with clean clothes, a full belly, and a datapad in her hand. She bought supplies with credits she had earned helping Cade fix the ship's systems. Vendors treated her like a customer, not a stray, not a body, not a risk. She smiled at that, just a small smile, but it felt like sunlight inside her chest. On the way back, she saw a young girl crouched in a corner, thin and shaking. People walked past her like she didn't exist, like she was furniture or trash. Valari stopped, heart aching, and walked over without thinking. The girl flinched as she approached. Holding her torn clothes close, Valari knelt and offered a food ration and a blanket. The girl stared at her, afraid, and whispered, "What do you want?" Valari placed the blanket gently around her shoulders and answered, "Nothing," she said. "Keep your clothes, keep your name." The girl stared at her like she didn't understand, and maybe she didn't yet. Valari didn't push, didn't stay, just stood and walked away, because sometimes a single act was enough to start a storm. And somewhere in that child's future, a fire might rise just like hers had. Back on the ship, Cade waited with 2 mugs of warm brew. She sat beside him and raised hers, tapping it lightly against his. "To freedom," he said. Lifting his drink to the ones who never looked away, she replied. They drank quietly, not needing words to explain the moment, because they both knew they'd earned it. That night, Valari sat alone in the pilot seat, watching the stars drift by. The universe felt huge again, but not terrifying. Not anymore. She had no chains, no brands, no debts, and no one to own her name. Just herself, her ship, and the stars waiting to be claimed. "All I had were my clothes," she whispered, resting her hand on the console. "But now I have everything I choose to carry."